All right, folks, a couple of weeks ago, I asked you all what some of your NBA hot takes were. We've done a couple episodes, and this will be the final episode of our little trilogy here. And of course, I'm going to end it with a Mavericks-centered video because, as you can imagine, most of the replies to my tweet were about the Dallas Mavericks. And I got quite a bit of tweets, obviously, a wide range of opinions and predictions for the Mavericks for this upcoming season. I would say the one topic that came up the most is who is going to be starting at the 3 for the Mavericks. Of course, they went out and they signed Klay Thompson this offseason, but they also brought in Naji Marshall. They also brought in Quentin Grimes, and there were a lot of opinions about who should be starting and who should be coming off the bench. And the vast majority of the opinions I saw was that Klay Thompson should actually be coming off the bench in favor of Naji Marshall. PRX said Naji Marshall will start for the Mavs at some point this season. Now, he was getting flamed just a little bit because this isn't necessarily a hot take due to injuries and stuff like that. I'm sure Naji Marshall will find himself in the starting 5 at some point, but I'm assuming what he meant to imply was that Naji Marshall will become the starter for the Dallas Mavericks officially at some point during the season. Look, there are a wide range of possibilities here. Entering the trade deadline last year, no team in the NBA had more unique starting lineups than the Dallas Mavericks. Of course, that was due in large part to injury, but we know Jason Kidd's not shy of experimenting with lineups. The Mavericks as an organization aren't shy of saying, hey, this guy's going to start for us, and then that person's out of the starting lineup 5-10 games into the season. And I'm not sure if they promised Klay Thompson a starting spot or not. You'd have to imagine that was maybe part of the wink part of the deal, was that, hey, you're going to be a big part of what we're doing here. You're going to be in the starting 5, but I don't know. This doesn't really matter to me very much, because what's the important thing for the Mavericks is who's going to be closing games. And I think why you bring Klay Thompson into the fold is so that you have a floor spacer and an offensive threat that can play alongside Luka and Kyrie at all times. So if Luka is on the floor by himself and Kyrie's on the bench, Klay Thompson can be out there to keep the floor spacing, and vice versa. When Kyrie's on the court and Luka's on the bench, Klay Thompson can be out there, so there's another offensive threat on the court that teams have to worry about, which wasn't really a thing the Mavericks had last season. And yes, I imagine there will be games where the Mavericks opt to go with Naji Marshall for his defense over a guy like Klay Thompson. The Pelicans were 3.2 points per 100 possessions better last season defensively when Naji Marshall was on the court. And he is a strong point of attack defender who can take the opposing team's toughest assignment. And that is what the Mavericks will be looking to replace. Derrick Jones Jr. last season spent 40% of his defensive possessions guarding the opposing team's top usage player, meaning he's guarding the other team's best player defensively. That number for Naji Marshall last year was 18%. That number for Klay Thompson last year, interestingly enough, was 19%. Of course, this is mostly dependent on roster construction. Naji Marshall played alongside Herb Jones, who is taking the other team's most difficult assignment night in and night out. And Quentin Grimes, 2 years ago with the New York Knicks, was in the 100th percentile when it came to matchup difficulty. So there's definitely a world where Quentin Grimes is knocking down threes, and he finds himself in closing lineups because the Mavs need his defense to close out games. This will be a fluid situation, and I genuinely don't think it necessarily matters who starts games. Obviously, for some of these guys, it is an ego thing, right? I've spent my whole entire career as a starter. I changed teams, and now you want me to come off the bench? I don't want to do that. I didn't want to do that with the team I was on for, the past decade plus. Why would I do that now on a new team? What really matters is who's closing games, who's on the floor down the stretch, and I just think it'll be a fluid situation. If the Mavs need defense, then I'd have to imagine it'll be Naji Marshall, or maybe even Quentin Grimes, or Dante Exum. I don't even know. The Mavs can even go small and have PJ at the 5 and have Naji and Klay on the floor at the same time. There's a lot of different directions they can go with how deep they have become as a team. This sort of leads me into the next tweet from Betsy. My hot take is that if for some reason Klay doesn't work in Dallas, it'll be because of personality, not production. I'm concerned someone like Naji or Grimes, or maybe some new wing they acquire, will be great and Klay will be furious about coming off the bench or something. It's definitely a possibility. It got a little bit dicey and a little bit rough with the Warriors, but I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that Draymond got his new contract. Klay was patiently waiting for his. It never came. Klay saw Andrew Wiggins get a new contract who wasn't even part of the core 3. So Klay Thompson's like, where's my contract? I'm still pretty good. I just averaged damn near 20 points a game. Where's my money? Then they wanted him to come off of the bench. Like, I just think the relationship got a little too sour there in Golden State. Now there's a new, fresh start here in Dallas. And look, I think Klay handled his benching last year in Golden State with some class, and he was very productive off the bench and was very productive when he got inserted back into the starting lineup. I can definitely imagine a scenario where it's January and Kidd decides, hey, you know what? Quentin Grimes makes more sense in our starting 5, or Naji Marshall makes more sense in our starting 5. Klay, you make more sense coming off the bench as this shooting sort of microwave scoring spark plug. And Klay's like, no, fuck that. I don't want that. I'm upset now. I'm hopeful that all of that stuff would have been ironed out in negotiations, so I guess we'll wait and see. I'm digging my head in the sand when it comes to this stuff. This take is from Fuck Off. Luka, 2023-2024, was the biggest MVP snub in the history of the league. That's a pretty big claim right there, the history of the NBA. And I feel like this type of stuff, we don't even really look at it until 10 to 20 years into the future. Like, for example, I feel like now more than ever, people say LeBron was robbed or Dwight Howard was robbed in 2011 when Derrick Rose won the MVP. But I feel like a big reason why we even say that is because Derrick Rose's career ended up going the direction that it went in. If Rose stayed healthy and was a top 5 player in the NBA for the next 7-8 seasons, I feel like nobody would feel that way. And you guys know how I feel about this. I made a full 30-40 minute video a few months back describing why I think Luka Doncic should have won the MVP this past season. I do think he was the best player in the league. I do think he should have won the MVP. 53 points per game plus rebounds per game plus assists per game. That is the most since the merger. 59 points created per game. That is the most in NBA history. Like, just an absurd offensive season. Just an absurd season from a production standpoint. The Mavericks went on to win 50 games despite the fact that they were injured for most of the season. The carry job that Luka had to endure during December and January when the Mavericks were just reeling with injuries and Luka was having to average 37 points a game, 10.5 assists over a 20-game stretch just to keep the Mavericks in games, including scoring 73 points in a game, the 4th most in the history of the league. I definitely think he deserved to be the most valuable player. Again, I've already laid out that case. I do think it'll bode well for Luka entering next season for his MVP candidacy, especially considering the fact the Mavericks did end up going to the NBA Finals. Luka won Western Conference Finals MVP, and he was absolutely phenomenal in that series. And we've seen, especially over the past couple of years, MVP voters reach a point where it's like, all right, Embiid, you were second in MVP voting 2 years in a row. There's been a lot of arguments for you. This is your year to get it. Okay, Jokic, we're sorry. We probably should have gave you 3 in a row. Embiid won it over you. You went on to win the NBA Finals, and you were the MVP of the Finals. We'll give you MVP this year. Luka will probably experience something similar next season. Assuming the Mavericks are good, assuming Luka does the typical Luka stuff, I would be a little bit surprised if he didn't win MVP next year. And then, you know, we won't look back at this past season and say that was the biggest snub in NBA history for MVP. That's just not really how it works. This one is from Slightly Biased Clips, which isn't me. There's confusion on this. The Slightly Biased Clips does not mean neither is Slightly Biased Muse, who I think is done. Slightly Biased is more biased than most people give him credit for. Thank you for this. Seriously. Thank you. I did a stream yesterday where I ranked each team's NBA offseason, and you would have thought I said the Mavericks had the worst offseason in NBA history because I had them third. And Mavericks fans were very upset about that. Just think this fan base needs to take a fucking deep breath. Like, what I'm seeing on Twitter, what I've seen in my chat, what I've seen in comments, something is like chemically off in the brain of this fan base currently. I don't know what it is. I don't know why they're such on edge. Like, we're coming off of a great season. Life is good. Chill the fuck out. This one is from Goji. Mavericks won't be a top 6 seed. I struggle to see how the Mavericks failed to win 50-plus games this upcoming season unless there's injury, which you can never really predict. And if we just go back through Luka's career so far, they were the 14th seed his rookie year. Obviously, they weren't trying to be good. 7th seed in year 2. They were much better than I think most people expected. 5th seed year 3. 4th seed year 4. Season from hell in year 5. The 11th seed missed the play-in tournament. We don't need to relitigate all of that. And the 5th seed this past season, year 6. So as long as the Mavericks are healthy and don't have a season from hell, they're typically competitive and they're typically a top 5 seed. They have the 8th most wins in the NBA since the 2019-2020 season. That is including their season from hell, and the 4th most in the Western Conference. And on paper, this is the best roster entering the season that Luka Doncic has ever had. So I really struggle to see how they won't be a top 6 seed. I think they'll be in competition for home court advantage all season long. And I do think that there's an outside chance that they win 55-plus games and are in contention for the number 1 seed. That would be my expectations for them entering this season. I think their roster is that good, that balanced, that deep. You just have to hope for health. I mean, if they're not healthy, then yeah, they might not be a top 6 seed. If they are healthy, I struggle to see how they're not a top 6 seed, to be honest with you. Benjamin says Jason Kidd is going to be an all-time great coach if he can stick around. This is just a hilarious case study in how we view NBA coaches. I'm guilty of it. Every fan is guilty of it. It's very difficult for us to gauge how a coach is doing. We don't know what's going on inside the locker room. We don't know what's going on during practices. We don't know, oh, this player messed up. It must be the coach's fault. Well, sometimes it's the player's fault. Actually, a lot of the time it's the player's fault. It is a results-driven business. And when things are going good, hey, Kidd might be one of the best coaches in the history of the league. When things are going bad, get his ass off the team. Me and Nick were saying that this past season during a losing streak. I went on Locked On Mavs and said, it's time to fire Jason Kidd. My bad, Jason. Hey, that's my bad. That's on me. This one is from Smokey the Bandit. Jaden Hardy would score 25 to 30 points per game on a dumpster fire lottery team. The next one, Josh Green will have the most productive season of his career next year, and it won't help the Hornets. The Jaden Hardy part, absolutely not. No, this is no chance in hell would he average 25 to 30 points per game on a dumpster fire lottery team unless he was taking 50 shots per game. I love Jaden Hardy. I hope it works out for him. I don't know how you could watch his career up until this point and think he could average 30 points per game if he were given the keys to a team. Absolutely not. Cam Thomas can't even average those numbers in Brooklyn, and he is a much more skilled scorer than Jaden Hardy in pretty much every single facet there is of the game. The Josh Green part, maybe. I mean, I don't know. I really don't know. I've given up on Josh Green. I had given up on Josh Green blossoming into anything other than just a solid role player. And you know what? Where he was drafted, 18th overall, I think that's where he was drafted. That's completely and totally fine. If you're getting like a solid rotational piece who can play on a winning contending team with the 18th overall pick, you're doing pretty good. What makes it sting a little bit more is who was drafted around Josh Green and after Josh Green. Of course, the guys like Tyrese Maxey, Desmond Bane. And if LaMelo is healthy and playing, yeah, I could see there being some like interesting connection there. Josh Green running the floor, Josh Green catching lobs. If LaMelo twists his ankle halfway into the season and misses 40 games again, I struggle to see how Josh Green will get anything going, considering most of his offense has to be generated for him. I wish him the best, though. Anytime a player leaves the Dallas Mavericks, I always hope they do well. I always wish them well. I love Josh Green. I loved having him on the team. His high moments are high, and they are interesting, but it was just time to move on and use him as a chip to upgrade somewhere else on the roster. So I wish him all the best. Nathaniel Trink says the Mavs will have 3 players average 20-plus this season, and it won't include Dwight Powell. Whoa, buddy. Whoa. Are you sure about that? I am immediately going to say this will more than likely not happen. It is possible, but it would have to require Luka taking a little bit of a step back in terms of scoring and in terms of usage, which I have said I think that will be when we see the absolute best Luka Doncic. It might not be the best statistical performance from Luka Doncic, who we know just puts up just absurd stats. I mean, his stat line this past season was absolutely fucking insane, but the best Luka will be when he's more comfortable with his roster, he's more comfortable with the pieces around him, and he can facilitate more and potentially, challenge to lead the league in assists and maybe average only 26 or 27 points per game. Only 26 or 27 points per game. I just went back and I looked since the merger. There's been 55 occurrences of a player averaging 30 points per game or more over the course of the season, and only 3 times has that player had 2 other teammates average 20 points or more. The 82-83 Jazz, Adrian Dantley, 30 points per game, Daryl Griffith, 22 points per game, and John Drew, 21 points per game, granted, on 44 games played, but still. The 2022-2023 Sixers, Embiid, 33 points per game. Harden, 21 points per game. Maxey, 20 points per game. And the other team, I guarantee you would never guess in a million years, it was also the 2022-2023 Portland Trailblazers. Damian Lillard, 32 points per game. Anthony Simons, 21 points per game. Jeremy Grant, 20 points per game. Jeremy Grant, former Maverick. And it's only been 16 times since the merger that 3 teammates have averaged 20 points per game or more on a team. Now, granted, 4 of those 16 have happened in the last 2 seasons. So it's definitely possible. It's definitely happened more often recently. And I'm assuming that would mean Luka, Kyrie, and Klay, all 3 average 20 points per game or more. When I did the research, I thought this was a for sure no, but it's definitely possible. If Klay's knocking down threes and he's just feasting off of the gravity that Luka and Kyrie Irving have, yeah, I could see him averaging 20 points per game, Kyrie 22, 23 points per game, and Luka 28, 29. It's certainly possible, and that's something to keep an eye out on. All right, we got a good amount of takes here from Adam, but I just want to talk about the first one here. Luka will end his career top 10 all-time in scoring. I don't think this is a hot take, really. I think the only way this doesn't really pan out is if Luka deals with injury or does decide at 32, 33 years old, hey, I'm done. I want to go to a farm in Slovenia and play Overwatch 6. Here is the current top 10 when it comes to all-time scoring. You see Carmelo Anthony is 10th right now with 28,289 points. Now, by the time that Luka is entering that equation, the top 10 will almost certainly look a little bit different. Harden is only 3,000 points away from the top 10. Have to imagine he's going to get there. Steph Curry has 23,000 points. He'll probably get there. Damian Lillard, 21,000 points. Good chance he'll get there. But Luka's definitely on pace to do it. He's 3rd all-time in scoring before the age of 25 years old. He currently has 11,470 points, meaning he needs 16,819 points to pass Carmelo Anthony. And if you were just to assume he plays 10 more seasons and hangs it up when he's 35 years old, he'd have to average 20 points per game. Obviously, assuming he plays 82 games a season, which isn't going to happen. So bump that number up a little bit. But yeah, Luka should probably easily do that. And it would be, I think, a little bit surprising if Luka is not in top 10 all-time in scoring. I mean, we've only seen 2 guys score more than he has at the age he is. So, yeah, he's definitely on pace to do it. And it would be a little bit surprising if he didn't, which is crazy to say. Like, it's crazy to say Luka Doncic will be top 10 all-time in scoring, and that's not a hot take at all. That's like, that's what he's on pace to do. Probably even higher than that. He might be knocking in the top 5 if he has a long career. We'll close it out with this one right here. My man Ricardo says Dallas now has the best center rotation in the NBA, and it's not even close. D-Live, Gaff, Dwight Powell, and Maxey. Well, I'm just going to come out and be the slightly biased, slightly unbiased bearer of bad news here. I don't think the Mavericks have the best center rotation in the NBA. I mean, I guess it really depends on what you're looking at. I would rather have the 76ers center rotation, obviously, Joel Embiid and Andre Drummond. Like, that's pretty good. I'd rather have Jokic and Saric. But if you're just looking at it from a depth perspective, which is what I'm sure Ricardo was doing here, I would have to give that nod to the Timberwolves, who have Rudy Gobert, Naz Reid off the bench, and then you have like Karl Anthony Towns, who can also play minutes at the 5. Like, that's a really, really good trio. But the Mavs do have an incredibly strong center rotation. We have no idea what Derek Lively is going to look like last year. I mean, he was sensational his rookie season. If he takes another step forward, then we're talking about a top 10 center pretty easily, top 7 center, top 5 center. I don't know where that conversation goes with Derek Lively. We know what Daniel Gafford is capable of. Dwight Powell gets a ton of shit, but as the third center, you could do way worse than Dwight Powell. And then Maxi Kleber obviously can play some small ball 5 minutes. And then you could even throw PJ Washington in the mix as well. After the trade deadline, Lively and Gafford combined for 19 points per game, 12 rebounds per game, and 3.5 blocks per game. So that's basically 48 minutes from your center position, giving you that stat line. That's pretty damn good. So I wouldn't say that they're necessarily the best. I definitely wouldn't say it's not close, but they're really fucking good. And they're probably top. If you're just looking at depth instead of just top end talent, obviously, which is what Ricardo's implying, yeah, they're probably top 2 or top 3, which is insane to say considering where this team was 2 years ago when JaVale McGee was starting at center to open up the season. Like, that's where we were 2 years ago. Not 5, 2 seasons ago. JaVale fucking McGee. JaVale McGee. Maxi Kleber started opening night for the Mavs at center last year, by the way. Do you remember that? It just popped into my head because I was trying to remember who it was because I knew it wasn't Lively, and I was thinking it was a Dwight Powell. It was Maxi. Maxi started at 5 opening night against the Spurs last year. Nico Harrison. Nico, I love you.